Hello there, people of the internet. This video is going to be more or less a just for fun video, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I have done like zero thought on this. I want all of my experience to be pretty much caught on camera whenever we go through these things, but I got a bunch of military surplus bolt-action rifles lined up here, and I want to go ahead and put them into a tier list. Now, as we go through the things I have on this wall, we're going to go ahead and do like genres of firearm. That'll make more sense here in a second whenever I dive more into it. Because if we did like individual guns, oh my god, we'd be here literally all day. So we're going to go ahead and do like A, B, C, D tier, and should we include an F tier? Nah, I think A, B, C, and D would be adequate enough for the things that we're doing here. So again, I have not put any thought into what it is I'm going to be tiering these guns as. We're just going to go ahead and sit down and experiment with that right on camera. Please don't take that sentence out of context. And I think that I know exactly what I'm going to do as our first one. So first one is going to be basically any of your old school bolt action rifles that are hard to source ammunition for. Like, for example, this is a Mauser model 7184, I think is the designation. But like your 10.4 Vetterli rifles and your Grau rifles and just your old school bolt action rifles that are really hard to find ammo for. We're going to go ahead and classify these all as like a D tier because they're fantastic guns, don't get me wrong, but they're really hard and really expensive to shoot. So unless you're like a hand loader with your own set of proprietary dies, then there's not very much option out there in terms of being able to take these out and shoot them. So I wanted to go ahead and cover these just immediately right off the bat because I'm sure somebody's going to answer them. All the guns that are in really unusual oddball calibers that are hard to find ammunition for, we're just going to toss those into D tier right now. I'm doing bolt action rifles specifically because I want to go ahead and do another video on semi-automatics. I'm sure somebody's going to ask about that in the comments down below. So D tier right off the bat, anything that you can't really find ammunition for. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and classify these as C tier, Steyr M95 rifles, but also your Steyr 8890 rifles. Your Steyr 8890 is going to be chambered in 8x50, and most of your Steyr M95s are going to be in 8x56, but there's a lot of them out there that are still chambered in 8x50, especially with the influx of rifles that we had come from Africa in one of our recent shipments here in the United States. But these rifles, they're not great, don't get me wrong, but they're far from bad. The triggers aren't necessarily all that great, the actions aren't necessarily all that smooth. The ones from Africa can be like really gritty and really rough, so I would recommend getting yourself one that is not from the shipment that came from Ethiopia, although the ones from Ethiopia, for the amount of money that you spend, they are pretty gosh darn good. But if you get one that is an 8x56 and still has its original bluing and, you know, doesn't have a bolt that's just scuffed up and whatnot, they can be relatively smooth actions, but I was just never really all that big of a fan of the Steyr M95 action. It just never really tickled my fancy all that much. If you love it, by all means, go ahead and do whatever it is that you want to do. But 8x50, there's only like one company out there making it, and you can never find the ammo from that one company, and whenever you do find it, it is stupidly expensive. And 8x56, there's a couple companies out there making it, but again, whenever you do find it, it is stupidly expensive, and it's just not really all that cost effective to take this out and use it as a plinking rifle. So it's a cool collectible, don't get me wrong. I really like the little carbine that I have here. Carbine, however it is you want to pronounce that. 5 shots of 8x50, which is what this rifle is chambered in. I load mine with black powder. It's a really delightful little shooting rifle, but I would not really classify it any higher than, say, C tier. It's higher than D tier because I can actually take it out and shoot it, but yeah, I wouldn't classify that higher than C tier. Probably also on that C tier, we're going to go ahead and add the Carcano, however it is you feel like pronouncing this rifle as well. Chambered in 6.5 Carcano, that's just how I'm going to pronounce it. It takes a proprietary in-block clip in order to feed this rifle. And I don't really like that idea. I don't really like that system of needing like a separate clip to be able to feed your rifle. And I understand that like modern firearms, like say the AR or the AK, those take external magazines and you need that magazine to be able to feed your firearm, so you still need that external factor to feed those. but those are not 5-shot bolt-action rifles from the time period that we're talking about. And finding AR and AK mags is a lot easier than finding Carcano clips. They're out there, but they wear out fast. They're clearly made to be disposable. They're just not great, especially the modern-made ones. They're just not great. Anyone who's ever messed with a modern-made Carcano clip knows that that last round just doesn't quite have the spring tension it needs, and so it tends to like move up or down inside of the magazine and cause a malfunction. And it just becomes a big problem and a big headache for everybody. All that being said, 6.5 Carcano, delightfully lightweight shooting round. The issue is there's a lot of companies out there that are not making bullets to the proper spec. It's supposed to be a 2.68 diameter bullet, but most companies make 6.5 Carcano ammo with a 2.64 diameter bullet. On top of that, if you get any Carcanos that are like cut down long rifles, there's the gain twist rifle issue where your bullets might not properly stabilize whenever they come out of your rifle, and that has caused some accurate issues with my own personal Carcanos that I have in the collection. So just because of the issues that this rifle has, it's a good rifle whenever you have everything all set up proper. And the sights absolutely suck on this thing. They're like zeroed out to, what, 400 yards if memory serves me correctly, but then you take the front sight, you stick it down at the bottom of this V-notch over here, and then you're still shooting stupidly high, and it's just not all that great. You can kind of learn the point of aim and point of impact for your particular rifle, but if you're a collector like me and you've got like a literal dozen Carcano rifles, you can never really hit anything with them. So just because of the shortcomings of the rifle, I'm going to go ahead and classify the Carcano as a C tier. That being said, I really, really love the Carcano. I just pay attention to its shortcomings. All right, up next, this right here is a sporterized 1917 Lee-Enfield. I'm going to go ahead and classify the 1917 along with the 1903 Springfield, both as A-tier guns. 30-06, there's literally nothing in North America that 30-06 can't handle. The actions for these rifles are strong, they're stupidly accurate. A lot of these guns are like stupidly smooth and made stupidly well. There's a lot of really good positivities whenever it comes to a 30-06 bolt-action rifle here in the United States just because of ammunition availability alone. But combine the ammunition availability with the extraordinarily well-made rifle that is the 1917 or the 1903, and you have yourself a really, really, really nice gun. Like, to the point to where modern-made guns that you can normally get for the same price point as a sporterized 1903 or 1917, or even one in its original military configuration, the 1903 and the 1917 are just a better quality, and you can feel that as you handle the gun. Like, for example, this one right here, I can feel the locking lugs inside of this thing like create a vacuum whenever I open this thing up, because the machine work in it is so tightly toleranced and well made and well done. And it's just one of those things that blows me away every time I use it. And it seems like every time I handle a 1903 or a 1917, I get that same just factor of, oh my god, this is a fantastically made rifle. So I'm going to go ahead and classify those as A tier. And I'm going to throw the 3040 Krag as a B tier. 3040 Krag is a little bit more difficult to find than, say, 30-06. Makes sense. 30-06 is absolutely everywhere. But it's one of those rifle cartridges that is more powerful than, say, 30-30, but it's not overly powerful. For most of us in the United States, many of us are not really shooting anything beyond 300 yards, and that's well within the realms of what the 3040 Krag is able to handle. On top of that, the 3040 Krag is, again, a stupidly well-made, stupidly smooth action. Like, I think the 3040 Krag Jorgensen rifles are probably the smoothest possible action that I myself know of. I describe it as having 2 panes of window glass lathered in butter and sliding them face to face on one another, and that describes the smooth action of your 3040 Krag. But just because of the lack of ammo availability and the lack of ability to take stripper clips, you got to kind of just load them one at a time inside that weird capsule magazine, which is very difficult to disassemble and find parts for. So if that breaks, then hey, good luck with your single shot rifle, I guess. Though there's no stripper clips or anything in that, so it is a little bit more on the difficult side. All right, up next, I see a Mosin-Nagant right here. Nagant, however it is that you want to describe that. I'm going to go ahead and put the Russian Mosins as like a B tier, because they're not all that accurate, but they're accurate enough for most of us. Every now and then you'll come across a Mosin-Nagant Russian-made that is quite accurate, but many of these are designed to shoot with the bayonet attached to the rifle, and very few of us actually shoot with the bayonet attached to the rifle, so we'll have like a point of impact shift moving around somewhere. A lot of us don't even notice it because these are 4 MOA guns. But if you go touching out to longer distances, then that point of impact shift could lead to some problems. 7.62x54R is still readily available. It's all over the place. But these rifles can be sticky, they can be finicky, they can be difficult. The stripper clips for them kind of suck. You gotta like do a special technique to where you hold the nose of a cartridge and like bend it down and push it in order to get any sort of real reliability. And if your gun requires a technique to be able to load, then it's not a good design. And the Mosin really wasn't designed to be a good design. That being said, the Russian ones, B tier, they do their job and they do it adequately. Not particularly well, but they do it adequately. The amount of money that you're spending on these nowadays, though, is just, it's not worth it. I would never buy a Mosin for the amounts that people are asking nowadays. If you want one, do it, go for it, you do you. I don't care what you do, I'm just saying what I'm going to do. That being said, the Finnish Mosins, anyone who's ever handled a Finnish Mosin knows just how overwhelmingly well made those rifles are, and they are stupidly accurate. Like I can't use that word on the internet. They are overwhelmingly accurate, and they're overwhelmingly nice to use. I would put the quality of those Finnish Mosins on par with the quality of American guns, and that is something that I would not say lightly. You can definitely tell that the Finnish put a lot of time and effort into making their rifles as good as they possibly could, and they are stupid accurate too. So Russian Mosins, whether it's the 9130, the 1891, the M44, the Model 38, whatever Russian Mosin it is that you want, they're basically all the same, and I'm going to classify them all as B tier. And then the Finnish Mosins, yeah, I'd classify those as A tier. Alright, up next we have our Lee-Enfield Series. This right here is a #1 Mark III, but there's a bunch of different Lee-Enfield rifles out there. The SMLE right here, just because of its leaf sight forward of the receiver, and it's really not that good, especially for someone who can't really see like myself. That's probably its biggest hindrance. I would go ahead and classify these as C-tier rifles just because of that sight. If you think that they belong higher, then by all means you go ahead and you make your own tier list and do whatever it is that you want. But with my particular eyes, I can't hit anything with this, like at all. So just because of that one hindrance right there, we're going to go ahead and knock that down a peg. Whereas the #4 rifles and the #5 rifles with that aperture sight on the rear of the receiver, those are phenomenally good rifles. I can actually see my sights on those, and I can smack some stuff with some seriously good accuracy out of those rifles. We're going to go ahead and classify the #4 as an A-tier rifle because that might be legitimately one of the best rifles ever made for that particular time period. And we're going to do the jungle carbines, the #5 rifles, as a B tier, just because some of them do tend to have a wandering zero. And as a result of that, you got to pay attention to where it is that your rifle's shooting, and it makes shooting in long distance a little bit more on the difficult side, but they are a lot easier to carry around than something like this. 10-shot external magazine. I know that they didn't issue multiple magazines with their rifles, but if you choose to use something like this nowadays, you can very easily go out and get yourself another separate magazine to be able to stick into your rifle versus having to load the magazine with 2 5-round stripper clips with rimmed ammunition. That's really not all that easy to be able to do. So it definitely has the benefits of capacity and ease of reloading. If you want to invest the money in more magazines, these rifles are very, very accurate. I will never say that the Lee-Enfield Series is an inaccurate rifle. As a matter of fact, I think the Lee-Enfield Series, other than probably the Mauser Series, is probably the most accurate bolt-action military surplus rifle out there. The actions aren't necessarily all that strong in comparison to something like, say, a Mauser, just because it locks on the rear of the system, but the action is plenty strong for the .303 British round that this rifle fires. These rifles are notorious for having headspace issues. They do headspace on the rim of a cartridge, and the bolts themselves, like the bolt heads themselves, are what actually headspaces the rifle. That's why if you go out and you get yourself an Lee-Enfield bolt, and then you get yourself a bolt head, and the bolt head doesn't quite fit or doesn't quite line up, that's just because it's a different size bolt head made for a different size headspace on a different particular rifle. And that's one of the big problems with setting up a bolt for a Lee-Enfield. You got to make sure that you get the right sizes, and that can be a little bit more on the difficult side. So, great rifles, great cartridge. I mean, .303 British, it's about as powerful as .308 ammunition is nowadays, or maybe M2 ball 30-06. It's a little bit more expensive to find, a little bit more difficult to find here in the United States, but it is absolutely available, and you can 100% go around and see what you can come across. In the United States, most of our rifles are loaded with .308 bullets, like the actual projectile, a .308 diameter bullet, versus the Lee-Enfield Series, the .303 British, and even the 7.62x54R, which is more like a .311 diameter projectile. So you got to pay attention to the diameters of bullets that you're using if you want to get the most effectiveness out of your rifle. But I still think that those are extraordinarily good rifles. All right, up next, the Arisaka Series. We're going to go ahead and cover the 6.5 Jap Arisaka, the Type 38, and the Type 99 7.7 Jap Arisaka. I would classify the 6.5 Jap Arisaka as probably a... Realistically, I'd probably give it a B tier. It's not a very powerful rifle, but boy is it stupidly accurate and stupidly comfortable to shoot. Your Type 38 is a long rifle, but there are shorter versions of that rifle out there, also chambered in 6.5 Jap, and they do their job exceptionally well. You just got to pay attention to the power of the cartridge that you're using. I wouldn't exactly take it big game hunting. That is where the 7.7 Jap comes in. The 7.7 Jap has, again, about the same power as M2 ball 30-06 or .303 British or 7.62x54R. As a matter of fact, I think it even takes the same diameter bullet. Oftentimes, it's in a shorter rifle. The Type 38 tends to be a shorter rifle, but that is not a steadfast rule. There are longer versions of this rifle out there. The wood that these rifles are made of is extraordinarily lightweight. I have no idea what kind of wood it is, but this is a relatively compact little rifle that is quite comfortable to handle and carry around and use. I've shot this thing on the channel before, if you want to go and look up footage of me actually sending lead with this thing. So there's nothing real special about them. They are technically Mauser actions, but they're not really Mauser actions. There's a lot of differences between Arisaka and a Mauser, but they're definitely, we're going to call them inspired by the Mauser action versus something like a direct copy. I would classify both the 7.7 Jap and the 6.5 Jap. We're going to go ahead and call them B-tier rifles, simply because the ammunition for them is not all that available. If it was more available than it is, I'd easily put these on A tier. They're accurate guns. They're very nicely made guns. They're well-shooting guns. Just make sure that you don't stick a live round inside of a trainer rifle, because that is one of the reasons why these rifles got such a bad reputation. But the 7.7 Jap and the 6.5 Jap each have their own pros and their cons. The 7.7, you get a nice, short, lightweight, handy little rifle and a full power rifle cartridge that can do some serious damage downrange. Or you got the 6.5 Jap, which is a surprisingly effective projectile out at very long ranges. Now, granted, it's not a 6.5 Creedmoor by any stretch of the imagination, but the 6.5 Jap is far from an uncapable round. I think it's about a 160 grain bullet moving about 2,300 feet per second, approximately, somewhere in that area. So it's a relatively heavy bullet for a 6.5 round, traveling at some respectable velocities. If you go throwing that 6.5 Jap inside of a long-barreled Type 38, you're going to get better velocities than you would inside of a shorter barrel, which we expect with all of our firearms. It's also a very light recoiling round, as most of your 6.5 rounds are, just because it's a lightweight bullet, not moving all that fast, but each of those cartridges have their own pros and their cons, so it all really depends on what it is that you are wanting to use the rifle for. All right, up next, we're going to go ahead and talk about the Mauser Series. Now, I'm going to go ahead and classify basically all of the Mausers as B tier rifles because they all have their pros and cons. You know what? No, I'm going to go ahead and retract that. I'm going to classify the 98 Mauser and the 91 Mauser as a B tier rifle. Hear me out on that before you go typing angrily in the comments. The 91, which is the 7.65 Argentine, ammo's hard to find. It's not the greatest of rifle. The extractor on it definitely needed to be redesigned, which is one of the things that happened with the 93. There's a couple odds and ends things that updated the 91 to the 93. And personally, I liked the Mauser Model 93 better. And the Mauser Model 93, it is a smoother action, and your Mauser Model 95, like the Chilean Mausers, and the 96, like the Swedish Mausers, those are all a 93 action. They're just like updated versions of the 93 action, kind of like how an M16 is still an AR-15. It's just a different version of an AR-15. The 95 Chilean Mauser and the 96 Swedish Mauser, those are both basically still 93 Mauser actions with some very, very slight changes. The big thing about the 93 action is it is a cock-on-close system, and that cock-on-close system means that you're not fighting spring tension whenever you try to open the bolts. And as a result of that, these actions have just extraordinarily smooth actions. They are more likely to be smooth than a 98 action where you're fighting spring tension in order to open that bolt. And just with my own experience, with all of the 98 actions that I have had the pleasure of messing with, they all tend to not be as smooth as a 93 action. I would recommend going out and getting yourself a 93 action, specifically like a Mauser Model 1896, like one of these Swedish Mausers over here, and you will really see just how unbelievably smooth that 93 action is, because these Mausers are just stupidly well made. I get to the Mauser 98 is a stronger action, but for the cartridges that these rifles are firing, the 93 is absolutely adequate to be able to handle these cartridges. Whenever it comes to a firearm's mechanical design, it's not just all about strength. You also have to pay attention to how smooth the rifle is to actually run and use. And the 93 action, just in my opinion, feels better than that 98 action. You go and you use them side by side, and I feel like a lot of you are going to agree with me. So the 98 and the 91, I'm going to classify those as B tier, and the 93 actions and all the derivatives of it, like the 95 and the 96, I'm going to go ahead and classify those as A tier, just because they are overwhelmingly nice rifles. You get yourself one that's in good condition, that has been well upkept over the years, and you got yourself a rifle that is of unbelievable quality. Alright, up next we're going to go ahead and look at the French rifles. French rifles are not going to score very high on this list. So, the 8mm Lebel rifle, the original smokeless powder rifle, the 8mm Lebel is weird, and it's got a weird taper to it, and this particular one has some weird smells coming out of it, not gonna lie. And I'm gonna move that away from my face, actually, because that does not smell very good. But the 8mm Lebel rifle, it's a tube-fed magazine with a really strange cartridge going through it. I get it, it's the first smokeless powder round. I'm going to give them some slack. But I'm going to go ahead and classify it as a C tier, just because it doesn't do anything particularly well, other than the fact that it's the first smokeless powder rifle. Besides that, it doesn't do anything particularly well. The 8mm Lebel, which is... it's also chambered in 8mm, or not 8mm Lebel. The 8mm Berthier, which is also chambered in 8mm Lebel, I think is a better system just because it takes Mannlicher style clips. It's kind of like an updated version of the Lebel rifle that has a different feeding system and some different wood on it and a few other odds and ends and different changes. So I'd classify that, just because of that Mannlicher in-block clip system, I'd classify that as a B tier. I know that other rifles with the Mannlicher clip, I said that wasn't all that good, but comparing the Mannlicher clip to like a tube-fed magazine, I will take the Mannlicher clip. So we're going to classify that as a B tier. 8mm Lebel is one of those cartridges that is not all that great at what it does, and it's kind of hard to find. You can find it, it's still made to this day. but it's not all that easy to find. Now, if we were to start looking at some other French bolt actions, like say the Mauser 36 chambered in 7.5 French, I would classify that one as an A tier. Just because of the capabilities of the 7.5 French round, it is on par with that of 7.62 NATO, which is a rimless cartridge that we still use to this day that came about in, I believe, the 1950s. The 7.5 French was such a massive, massive step up from the 8mm Lebel. On top of that, the Mauser 36 rifles, they are, I'm not going to go ahead and call them like fantastic. I'm not going to call them all that great or exceptional or inspiring, but anyone who knows anything about them knows how unbelievably simple they are. They are simple to disassemble, simple to manufacture, simple to use. Just the way that they were zeroed from the factory, they're not necessarily grunt proof. I don't want to call them like soldier proof or indestructible, but it's very hard to mess up a Mauser 36 just because of how few parts that they have. And if you do end up messing up a Mauser 36, the ability to be able to fix those rifles is staggering just because of how simple they are and how easy it is to manufacture not only the rifles, but parts for the rifles. So I would go ahead and classify the Mauser 36 as an A tier. I kind of want to throw it in B tier just because it's not quite on par with other rifles that are in A tier. So if it is A tier, we're going to throw it at the bottom of A tier or the top of B tier. I'm going to go ahead and let you guys decide which category you want to throw that one in. But I think that the Mauser 36 deserves its place up in the higher tier of rifles just because of its simplicity, ease of manufacture, and it's really, really good cartridge. 7.5 French is a really phenomenal cartridge for the time period where it came out. So there we go. I think that's all the ones that I wanted to throw into this video. There's probably a couple other ones, like there's the Vetterli rifles, like the 6.5 Vetterli that Italy made. I'd probably throw those in a D tier just because you got to really know what it is that you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to blow up your rifle. And there's a couple of other ones that are a little bit more niche than anything else. But I think this right here is a pretty good tier list. So thanks for watching. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.